Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Platonic Soul. I hope you've been well. And I hope you like my t-shirt, which I'm wearing on this special occasion of talking to you about this wonderful daimon, Eros. Do you ever wonder what it is about human desire that somehow never seems entirely satisfied or even satisfiable? Why do we scheme and toil so hard for something, only to feel let down when we finally achieve it? Why do we often not really seem to even know what we want? Why are we such a restless species? In my last episode, we met Diotima, the prophetess, who Socrates says taught him everything he knows about Eros. And I talked about how she sort of wades into this solution of the problem of Eros, arguing that it's a kind of daimon, a kind of force, you might say, that directs us to our destiny in some way. Well, this is where Diotima's wading will take us to answering powerfully, yet also a bit tantalizingly today. What is it about our Eros that is never really satisfied? And she'll try to explain it using a myth that you might find unforgettable because it speaks with such power and such poignancy to our human state, to what it is to be human. On learning from Diotima that Eros is a daimon, Socrates immediately asks who his father and mother are. You could say he wants to know what the principles or elements of Eros are. And this is how she replies. When Aphrodite was born, all the other gods, as well as Poros, which means resource, Poros, the son of Metis, and Metis means intelligence, were at a feast. And when they had dined, Penia, that means poverty, arrived to beg for something, as might be expected at a festivity, and she hung about near the door. So we have poverty and resource, or some would say poverty and plenty, which makes a neat pair of opposites, though resource seems a closer translation of poros than plenty, actually. The root meaning of the Greek word poros is a means of crossing a river, like of a ford or a ferry, for example. And from there it took on this more abstract sense of a means of accomplishing anything. It could also mean a passage generally, or an opening, hence our word por. You may also be familiar with this word aporia, a dilemma in which there seems no way forward. The alpha at the beginning of the word has this negating effect. So in an aporia, there's no passage or means of getting across. Anyway, poros and penia, it seems, resource and poverty, are fated to come together, according to Diotima, to produce a famous child. She continues, Then Poros got drunk on nectar, for there was not yet wine, and heavy of head, went into the garden of Zeus and slept. Then Penia, that's poverty, who because of her own lack of resources was plotting to have a child made out of Poros, reclined beside him and conceived Eros. It is for this reason that Eros has been the attendant and servant of Aphrodite as he was conceived on her birthday, for he is by nature a lover in regard to the beautiful, and Aphrodite is beautiful. It's Eros's unique parentage, Diotima seems to be saying here, that explains human restlessness. And this, I feel, is where the passage gets its incredible poignancy. She continues, Because Eros is the son of Poros and Penia, his situation is in some such case as this. First of all, he is always poor, and he is far from being tender and beautiful, as the many believe. This is a bit of a dig at Agathon. You might remember he talked a lot about Eros being the greatest thing, the best thing, the most beautiful thing, and tender. He's far from being tender and beautiful, as the many believe, but is tough, squalid, shoeless, sleeping in doorways and along waysides in the open air. He has the nature of his mother, always dwelling with neediness. But in accordance with his father, he plots to trap the beautiful and good, and is courageous, stout, and keen, a skilled hunter, always weaving devices, desirous of practical wisdom and inventive, philosophizing through all his life, a skilled magician, druggist, sophist. And his nature is neither immortal nor mortal. She said this last time, you may remember. But sometimes on the same day he flourishes and lives whenever he has resources, and sometimes he dies, but gets to live again through the nature of his father. So he has this almost kind of phoenix-like quality. And as that which is supplied to him is always gradually flowing out, it seems to be the nature of having poverty as a parent, that you can't keep hold of anything. Eros is never either without resources nor wealthy, but is between wisdom and lack of understanding. I've always felt this passage cuts so powerfully to the heart of human nature, what it is to be human. He is far from being tender and beautiful, as the many believe. This, I think, is where this, maybe more than anywhere else, this passage gets its power, the way it gets at human vulnerability. Sigmund Freud wrote that we're never so vulnerable as when we love. And Diotima, I think, is saying something similar here, that Eros is always on the verge of the most abject poverty. It's important to note, though, that this is not a purely tragic view of human nature. And I think the beautiful and wonderful way Plato has woven the comic and the tragic together here is where it gets its great power and poignancy to a great degree. To be human is to live in this twilight state between emptiness and satisfaction. It's in our nature to be deeply vulnerable, but it's also in our nature to be constantly finding solutions. There's something else very important about this passage that's intimately connected to what I've just said about it. I think we have clearly here the continuation of a trend we noted in our last episode, a curious and really quite unexplained apparent widening of the meaning of Eros here. We have again a suggestion that the beautiful, not just, for example, the sexually attractive, is the object of Eros, for example. The beautiful itself. What's with the mention of philosophizing also? What's that got to do with it? And Diotima emphasizes that part even more. Immediately after this passage, she says, "No one of the gods philosophizes and desires to become wise, for he is so. Nor if there's anyone else who is wise does he philosophize. Nor in turn do those who lack understanding philosophize and desire to become wise, for it is precisely this that makes the lack of understanding so difficult, that if a man is not beautiful and good nor intelligent, he has the opinion that that is sufficient for him. Consequently, he who does not believe that he is in need does not desire that which he does not believe he needs. Socrates then asks who the philosophers are, if they are neither the wise nor those who lack understanding, and she replies, by now it would be perfectly plain even to a child, and Diotima likes to tease here, that they are those between them both, of whom Eros would be one. For wisdom is one of the most beautiful things, and Eros is love in regard to the beautiful. And so Eros is necessarily a philosopher, and as a philosopher, he is between being wise and being without understanding. So yeah, what's going on here? What does Diotima really mean by Eros? What's she really talking about? Finally, where do you feel this myth has left you? I ask this because I think this way of explaining through myth, powerful though it can be with its unforgettable images, may, like Eros itself, not leave you entirely satisfied. And that's because you're human. Having poros as the father of our desire, after all, we humans are plotters and schemers. And I think generally, when we're looking for an explanation, we crave something concrete in our minds as a takeaway. Poignancy alone isn't going to really satisfy us. We want an explanation that our minds can take hold of, to give us a sense of conviction, a sense of, if you like, fixed contact or traction with reality. And that can come to us mortals only through thought, through abstraction, through concepts that work universally, so that we can use it as a basis for action in life. So in other words, this myth needs to be unpacked. And unpacking this myth is what Diotima will now do. And in that unpacking will be revealed the answer to this question of what she really means by Eros, and with it, the simple secret at the heart of real platonic love. Simple, and yet, I think, massive in its significance. And that's what we'll start talking about in our next episode. Hope to see you then, and thanks for watching.